see what they want to learn. Hey, folks, should we get started? All right, so push this on here. So this session is about working with the RChain testnet. And I think if we make the topic a little bit more broad, it's working with the RChain node, right? Whether you're running it at standalone mode or you're running with the RChain testnet itself. So I have not, to be honest, I've not prepared a detailed slide deck. I thought I would ask the audience what kind of topics you're interested in having us cover. I think before we dive into topics, I'll introduce myself. I'm Meta Parlikar. I'm the lead project manager for the project. This is Sebastian Bach. He works on the gRPC API on the node. And this is Kyle Butt, who is responsible for the rolling interpreter and the rolling language. So we're here to hopefully answer some questions, give you some information, but I'd like to turn it over to you a little bit to get a sense of what are some of the topics you'd be interested to hear about. I believe, is this on? Yeah. So we have to pass the microphone around, so I'm going to go ahead and give this to Ed.
My first question would be, where can I find information on how to connect to the testnet?
Okay, sure. We do all of our documentation in the wiki, so I'm going to go ahead and show you the link. Are you part of the member Discord channel or anything? Okay,
not yet.
So yeah, so let me go ahead and I'll just put that up on the screen right now. Great. Discord? So if you want to connect with us directly, we do have a public RChain Discord channel, and you can reach out to any one of the members of the development team and learn a lot about the project that way. But for the time being, we have the nodes published on our public wiki.
Okay.
So we have a page called our node bootstrap addresses, and if you see right here, these are the addresses available for all the different versions of Node, and we will be including one of the bootstrap nodes for the testnet here, so you can connect to the testnet. Now, right now, there is no bonding protocol that's in place as of yet, so the testnet validators are locked in terms of the validator set, but that doesn't mean you can't interact with the testnet. You can absolutely perform a deploy. You can also connect a read-only node to the testnet and obtain all the blocks from the testnet. But in terms of being a validating node, we have to wait until the bonding protocol is fully fleshed out and implemented. And at that point, new validators can join the network after it's launched.
So if I spin up my node and it syncs the blockchain, I will not be able to propose new transactions on it?
That's right. You can't propose transactions on that node connected to the testnet yet.
I have to connect to a validator.
So there's the terminology. You can propose new transactions. What you can't do is propose new blocks.
No, I don't want to propose blocks. I want to propose transaction. I send a new transaction.
Yeah, there's a...
No problem doing that at all.
Oh, okay, great.
Yes. Do you know what the API is to do that?
Well, I've seen the documentation for that.
Okay.
So I'll gotta,
okay, great.
gotta
Okay.
read that.
Just in case. Okay, awesome. Is there any other topic that you folks want to learn about in terms of working with the testnet or with the node, if we can be more broad about that?
So let's say I have a smart contract that I've written. Now, how do I deploy it to the node, and how do I interact with it? Now, I want to send some data to my smart contract, and what do I do? Like, do I have a REST endpoint or gRPC? How do I interact with it?
Okay, I had a little trouble understanding your question. So are you asking basically how do you work with the node? You'd like to see how to work with the node? Okay, sure, we can show you that. Happy to demonstrate that. Okay. I might need help from you guys. Sebastian.
Are you able to increase your font size?
So what I'm doing right now is I'm running the node in standalone mode. So I'm running a node here locally on my machine. And what you're watching is right now is the node starting up. And as soon as it starts up, we're going to kick off another terminal window here. And we'll start invoking the client APIs, which are the gRPC endpoints that will support deploy, propose, and a variety of other features in the node. Okay, so my node is started up, and the way you know that, you can see at the bottom here, it says listening for traffic, and it provides a node address here starting with D6, and it's listening on port 404000, and that's the default port for the gRPC API. So Sebastian, I want to turn it over to you. You get to type here for a little bit now. Whoops, which one is that here? No. I have too many open. 1 second. I have too many tabs. Oh no, did I just do anything? No, no, no. Did I kill the node? Sorry guys, 1 second. Meta did a bad thing. Now do I have to do this again? Sorry. Hope it doesn't crash. All right, when I do this again and try to start it, we're going to, you want to just show them all of the commands that are available?
Yes, sure. You can see all possible modes and options to this mode just by running the plain R node. Okay, here we see all possible modes and options to that.
Is that font okay? A little bit bigger? Command plus, yeah.
Okay, the most popular command is, of course, run in standalone mode or with the bootstrap node. And for running a node against a bootstrap node, against a specific bootstrap node, you would write, okay, it's now overlapping a little bit here.
Yeah, let's just put some of the options up and kind of walk through there. Scroll up a little
Okay,
bit.
no, it's okay. You would write bin R node and then run and then -b, and then we are choosing our bootstrap node we started seconds ago. You need to provide an R node address for that. Oh, why is it copying string? Okay.
So one of the things I want to call attention to is that when you run R node, the default gRPC client, it looks very similar to running the node itself, right? So you'll notice here that we're running R node and we're sending a command here that we're creating. You're running another client?
Yeah, I was only showing how to connect to a bootstrap node we don't need to do that, but at least I wanted to show how you would connect to some Bootstrap node. The proper addresses or Bootstrap address you will find in the RChain wiki. If you would like to spawn a node and join the testnet, like I guess a read-only node, because not as a validator, right?
So the dash -b parameter specifies which Bootstrap node you want to connect to, and that wiki page will give you a list of Bootstrap nodes depending on the software version you're running. Our node is a little sensitive to the software version you're running for the time being because we are making rapid changes. So know where you get your binary from, where you're installing it from, if it's dev, master, or testing, and make sure you connect to the appropriate node. We've got configuration management processes in place to make sure that those nodes are automatically updated with the latest version of those branches.
I'm sorry. First. So I have two questions. One is, currently it seems that the validator has to propose manually a block, right? There is
That's
some.
right.
Okay. And the second is about the status of Roland. Is it worth already to learn the current version of Roland, or will there be major changes before the Mercury release?
So to answer your question about Roland, there won't be enough lost. The time that you would lose if you waited until Mercury is far worse than any changes we're going to make between now and Mercury. So start learning it now. And in fact, the more users that we have now, the more it's going to be a product that those users like by the time Mercury rolls around.
Meta or Sebastian, I had a question about, since testnet is now up and the Genesis block has been gone through consensus essentially, can one connect to any node at this point, or do you have to connect to the Bootstrap node?
No, you can bootstrap off of any of the nodes in the testnet if you want to. Now bear in mind, there's no bonding protocol yet, right? So you can't bond onto the testnet and become a validator. But you can join the testnet as a read-only node, and you should be able to receive blocks. And you can perform deploys against the testnet, you just can't propose blocks. Now, the testnet validators have been generous enough to expose both their deploy and propose ports. So arguably, right, you can deploy some code to their server, and then you can propose a block on their behalf because they haven't locked that port down. But in mainnet, only a validator would actually be able to call the propose API. So would you mind scrolling up a little bit, Sebastian? Because I want to walk through some of the... So you'll notice here there's quite a few configuration options, right? And so these options really are for those of you that are system administrators that are going to run really big nodes or a pool of nodes. It offers you the flexibility of configuring the node server as you wish, right? So to give an example, right, you can specify the gRPC ports, right? And you notice that we've got two gRPC ports there. One is the external, one is the internal. The internal port would be what we'd use for the propose command. So let's say, for example, if I'm a system administrator and I have, 15 nodes that I'm managing, I would want to have a thin client that I would create using gRPC that would manage how those nodes propose blocks. And so I could create that thin client behind my firewall and access those gRPC endpoints for proposing. I could also create a configuration file that standardizes the configuration for my nodes so that I'm not having this really long, messy start command. For those of you that have watched the node testing Tuesdays, you know that the run command got very, very long, and it provides a very easy way to standardize the configuration of your servers, right? They all look the same, your config file is exactly the same, and there's just a few things that vary from node to node with respects to individual server configuration. Let's see, what else can I tell you about here? If we scroll down, we've got the option for the data directory. This is where you want to actually store your whatever persistent data. You can configure which data directory you want the node to run against. The bootstrap, we already talked about that. It's -b/bootstrap. That's the bootstrap node you want to connect to. The -genesis validator, this is a flag that's used during Genesis. If you want to spin up your own private RChain network, you can also go through the Genesis process and launch a separate network based off of the RChain software, and you could use this flag. What else can I talk about here that's interesting? What's the key for? Key is for, what's the key
It's
for?
for the certificate. The idea of the certificate comes from a TLS, the idea of the node comes from a TLS certificate, which must be located in the data dir by default, and also the private key for the certificate. But if you would like to provide a custom path to the certificate and the private key, you can do that on the command line or in the configuration file. And that's the key.
Okay, sounds good. Anything below here? We have other more advanced options here. Map size, this is for those of you that are developers and want to look at the tuple space size. This map size is a parameter that's consumed by LMDB. The metrics port, this is interesting if you want to override the metrics port where you're exposing your metrics. So those are, for those of you that came to the performance test or even the Genesis launch, you saw Grafana. Those metrics were exposed in a very specific port, and this is configurable. The default is 40403, I believe. If you want to turn off UPnP, you can do that at runtime or within the configuration file.
Is the requirement of memory for 16 gigabyte the actual requirement? Because I saw that there is not so much load memory-wise currently.
So it depends who you speak to. Yeah, on the memory requirements, it depends who you speak to. If you speak to some of the heavy-hitting validators, they will tell you that 16 gigabytes is absolutely nothing, right? They're running nodes that have over in excess of 200 gigabytes. For our performance tests, we consumed about 15 to 16 gigabytes of memory for 1,500 COM events and about 400 COM events per second, which translated to about 40 basic token transfers a second. We've got a lot of performance work to do still, but we did that in 16 gigs of RAM. And I believe 20 cores on the machines. They were Docker machines. Those are about the benchmarks we have today. Our intention is to really improve those, but you can imagine that the performance would be greatly improved with more RAM, right, and more CPUs. Okay. So then these are the subcommands here. So the subcommand, we'll walk through these. The REPL and the eval commands, this is an opportunity for, there's an interpreter, right? The rolling interpreter that runs as part of the node. That's where all the deploys are evaluated. That's where a lot of the magic happens. And you can test run your contracts, right? If you're writing a contract, you're going to need to be able to test it. And the REPL and the eval modes allow you to do that. Those are separate gRPC endpoints. And we can demo those for you later in the talk. Let's see. If you're going to run REPL or eval, you need to pass in a file name or you need to pass some Roland code in order for it to evaluate. And then subcommand deploy. This is where you actually send a block of Roland code to a server. That's the deployment command. And then there should be another one. These are the parameters for deploy. These we set defaults in. So this is for the the economics parameters that are coming, right? So you'll fully expect to have to pay for your deployments just as you do on Ethereum. These are the flags that will be required as part of that. Further down here, we have show block and show blocks. So show blocks will display the local blockchain on the system, and then show block will show a single block given its hash. So after you go through deploy propose, then you have an opportunity, if you're a fully validating node or a read-only node, you should be able to run show blocks as your node gets blocks from the network. You can run these two commands and see the actual blockchain content locally on the node. Okay. Do you want to try running the REPL maybe or an eval mode? Any other questions with what I've gone over so far? Okay. Is there a mic down there? You got one? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Is there any intent or plan to allow you to change the config of the node as it's running? So like some type of API for changing, say, the flow limit or anything like that without restarting the node?
Not at the moment.
Okay, cool.
There have been discussions around how node operators will upgrade the node, update the node without being slashed, right? Exiting and rejoining the network, restarting nodes. These are all things that are on the backlog for us to address.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yep.
Maybe we can start the REPL and
Sounds good.
and
Kyle can run some rolling in there.
And Kyle can run some.
Sounds great.
It's quite straightforward. It's hard REPL.
We need some rolling.
Outside.
It's harder because it's not to the rack. Oh, that's right, because it doesn't print it out here.
Okay.
It prints on the server console.
Since we are connected to with the REPL to the local Bootstrap node, we can see the output of the server side.
Yep.
Right? We are now using our local Bootstrap node, so the output of the Roland program, which was the new standard out contract.
Do you want to explain to them what the tuple space contents are? Or the storage contents? No? Fair enough. It's mostly for debugging purposes, the tuple space contents.
I have a question about the block structure. In the testnet, are blocks forced to be totally ordered?
No. Blocks are not forced to be totally ordered. So a block can have, I don't know if they just happen to be, but I know that we support blocks with multiple parents. And the goal is that if the rolling transactions in those blocks don't conflict, you should get the same result. It doesn't really matter which order they ran in.
But isn't it gonna matter in terms of who pays for the execution?
No, so that's how you did it. No, it doesn't matter if the blocks commute. They get the same effect in either order.
Right, but the person that triggers a COM event is paying for the execution, right?
So two blocks commute if they don't mention the same name. And if neither block causes an event on a name in the other block, they aren't going to trigger the set of COM events that they'll trigger is the same no matter which order they run in. That's what it means to commute.
I thought that they would commute if it doesn't matter in which order they would be applied.
Yeah, then each block will cause the same COM events, and so the payment will be the same.
But the COM events could be triggered by different people if the blocks are proposed by two
Then they don't commute.
Okay, so in order for them to commute, they also need to be triggered by the same people.
No, I don't think you understand what it means for blocks to commute.
So do you want to tell me your definition of what it means for them to commute then?
Okay, so two blocks commute if so in a block, we list all of the names on which a COM event occurred. So if if all of the names in which a COM event occurred are disjoint, including partial sentence, right? If that is disjoint, there's no way for one to affect the other. So it doesn't matter which order they run in.
I just feel, well, I don't feel. So it seems like two blocks, when combined, can trigger a COM event, even though independently, it doesn't matter in which order these blocks were applied, they would trigger the same COM event, but in ordering them in the first way, the block number 1 would trigger the COM event, and ordered in the other way, block number 2 would trigger the COM event.
No, that can't happen.
I think I have an example where...
Okay, well, if you can show me the example, I'll show you where they have a name in common.
Okay.
Well, Kyle, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, it might be helpful for you to define a COM event. I mean, when I first heard that word many months ago, I was thinking communication event, but in rowing and row couples, that means something quite different. Right? Right? Can you define COM event for us?
This one switches. Oh, no, it's on. So a COM event is the one reduction rule in Rolang, where you have data waiting on a channel and a receive waiting or looking for data on the same channel. And it doesn't matter which one got written to the tuple space first. When those two things meet and the continuation is invoked, that's a COM event.
Any other questions? What do you guys want to see next? This session is for you. We're kind of being open. Yes?
I apologize for not remembering the roadmap, but is there intent to allow any other non-Genesis block validators to be able to propose blocks between now and Mercury?
I think you're talking about bonding of new validators. So
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean.
yes, absolutely, 100%. The bonding protocol isn't implemented yet, but it is coming very soon. And it will happen, oh yes, well in advance of testnet. No worries. No, 100% no. There will be an opportunity for everyone that wants to participate in testnet as a validator to do so.
At several points between now and then, we will refresh testnet, and so you can request to be on the refresh.
And then do you foresee the possibility of if someone on the outside started their own private, kept up, stayed up to date, when the next one came out, could you envision, or is this maybe crazy talk, that they could have blocks in their, let's call it private shard, and then when the refresh occurs, so that they could be bonded to the testnet, would they be able to do some of that cross-shard work that we envision for down the road? Does that question make sense?
I think I understand what you're asking. Yeah. So what you're asking me is if someone was to run their own private RChain network and they kept up to date with the software and they had a little blockchain going, that at the point when we introduce sharding, that they could then mount their shard onto the RChain network.
So, yeah, the way that it works is that there's nothing special about being a shard other than you're running contracts in the root shard that wait for signatures from all of the validators of the child shard. So you're acting like a client, and like you don't even have to be running RChain to be a child shard. You just run the same contracts in the root shard.
And we're planning on introducing sharding before December. Are there other questions? Would you guys want to see, can we do a deploy here? Probably can't do a propose, but we could do a deploy because we only have one node, unless you want to connect to.
We can start other.
Or we can try to do a deploy to one of the servers in the testnet. I do have an IP address. We're gonna try that.
Pardon? What can we do?
We could do a deploy to one of the servers in the testnet if you wanted to do that, because I have the IP address. You show them how to deploy to the testnet.
What do? Let's check. That
I have the IP address of one of the bootstrap nodes.
in our node. It's okay. I believe I'm. Okay. Sorry? Okay.
We'd have to load up the Grafana dashboard because I have the IP addresses there.
So we need some bootstrap address of that, right? Or not?
No, you need to do a deploy, but you need to specify the gRPC host for the deploy. So
Okay.
prepend the gRPC host, and then I'll
Oh,
give you the
okay.
IP address and the port number,
Mhm.
and then we can deploy a contract. You could probably deploy Hello World.
Do we need to do gRPC host, or is it a local host?
No, it's not the local
Okay.
host. We need to
Okay.
specify the gRPC
Oh.
host, which would be the host on the node. So you're not prepared. You need the IP address, right?
Yes, I need
Yeah.
the IP
Let me
address.
grab it. Hold on, give me 1 second. Oh, where's my? I know, it's in a second. I want to grab. Hold on a second. Let's go to Grafana. Huh? I need an IP address of a node that's already running. Can you give me one? One in the testnet, preferably? Yes, I want the one in testnet. Come up here and help me. Save me, Michael. Okay. Because I'm scrambling for an IP address because I didn't prep one.
Sorry.
That's okay. No, you're good.
Sorry I'm late. I got caught up in other things.
It's not like you're busy or anything, so yeah, we just need an IP address.
You just need an IP address?
Because we're going to do the deploy, I guess.
Oh, you're going to deploy Aiken? Okay,
Yeah.
sure. Let's see.
That's okay.
Okay. So this is the thing that I've got up.
Okay.
So I guess you just want the IP address there?
Yeah. 52.119.8.9. Sebastian, do I need to specify the port? 40403. Is it like that? Or just the IP address?
The port, I guess, is the same, the default port, or is this a
Yeah. No.
custom port?
No, it's a default port.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that, and then
Then we need to provide some mode.
Deploy?
Deploy or propose?
Deploy. It's just deploy, right? And then we want this, hello.row,
Oh,
right?
so you have,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Let's see if it mirrors displays. We are just winging it, folks. It's okay. Okay. All right, so we worked through, got some information here. We'll provide the IP addresses for the nodes that can accept a deploy. But here's an example of a deploy command. I think we need the bin. But let's see. So we specify the gRPC host. That's a server on the testnet. We've specified the deploy command. And then following the deploy command is an example of the contract we wish to deploy. Make sense? Okay. Although I think that I need to, yeah, so it's bin.rnode. .bin.rnode. So it's running my deploy right now, hopefully. And the answer I'll get back from the node is success, if all goes well. And Michael's looking at the node console here, and he'll let me know when he's received a deploy.
Yep. Receive deploy.
So his node has received the deploy, and then it will send me back a message here. You see response success. So this is how you know that your deploy has gone to the testnet. Now, it's up to Michael to do a propose, but I think we can sneak it in, can't we? Is the proposed port open?
Yeah, the proposed port will be open on this machine.
Yeah. So if you want to force Michael's node to do a propose. So if we want to have Michael's node do propose, we're just going to go ahead and call the propose API on that node. And his node will get a propose command. Does the propose give feedback too?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Sure does. It tells you there's an error.
It's telling me there's an error. It's not happy right now. So that's basically how the deploy and propose works. The ports, again, on the testnet are open to do deploy and propose, so you're welcome to play with it. Testnet validators have been generous enough to let that stay open. Questions?
I had trouble hearing the last part because of those talking in the back. Is that the expected response?
No.
No.
Oh, so what's the
That's
expected?
definitely not the expected response.
What's the expected response?
It should say success.
There you go.
and it should tell you which block, what the hash is of the block that it added.
All right, thanks.
Yes. So yeah, we're having an error there. That's not good.
I think, yeah, I'm pretty sure that most of the nodes on testnet are encountering a similar error at the moment.
Okay.
I tried to install our node locally on my Mac and with Brew, and it just fails. So is that normal?
We don't, yeah, I don't believe you install Node using Brew. We haven't done that yet. So there's a tarball, a gzip, and an install script.
That's the official instruction on the README. It's that there was a pull request that says remove the instructions for Mac install and replace with Brew. And now it says Brew install, and that doesn't work.
No, I don't, I have not, I'm not aware of that, and we will get that fixed right away.
Thank you.
So it should be the, I run, this is a Mac, and I run the node locally, as you can tell here, and it's the tarball. And there's a Mac OS install script. There's a dependency on libsodium, and that install script just gets that libsodium. Once you have libsodium installed once, and you can just extract the contents of the gzip, and you're fine, the tarball. So I apologize for that. We will sort that out right away. Thank you.
I'll look at the older versions then.
Yes, please. It would be nice, we should work on the Brew piece, but we haven't, I don't believe there's any official work done on that yet. Are there other questions? Any from the DApp developers? Do we have any DApp developers here that are curious about deploying? Okay. Anyone else? Not yet. Okay. Anything else you guys want to know about? So we've taught you about deploy, propose, shown you how to run the node. Talked a little bit about using the REPL. The eval mode is very similar to that. You'll get the same output from the eval mode as the REPL mode. Any other questions? So we're dead in the water with that proposed, right? It just goes through. Nope. Yep, it told me it's there. It's not happy. There's no proposed. I got no proposals. Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Now let's say I have an app running.
Pull it up a bit because I can't hear you. Can we listen to the person asking question? Thank you.
Okay, so let's say I have an app running. Now the app wants to write the data to the blockchain. So how exactly do you do that? Could you give me an example?
The app wants to write. The app
So
wants
it's-
to write
it's
data to the blockchain.
So it's a web app.
I'll pay attention. Could you repeat your question?
So I have a web app, and that web app wants to write some data to the blockchain. So how exactly do I go about doing that?
It's super easy. Every single deploy is going to contain data that's written to the blockchain, right? So what kind of data are you trying to write?
So let's say it's just some JSON data.
Sure, yeah, great. So there's a few options for that. You could try to encode it as actually like a rolling object, because rolling also has maps, right? So you could take your JSON and convert it into a map. But if you, like, the simplest thing to do would just write it out as a string, and you can store it on a channel, right? You could say new x in x bang JSON string. And when you deploy that, it'll go to some node, and when the node proposes it, it'll be on the blockchain.
Okay, so does it have to have a .row extension? Did I understand that correctly?
You need to make a source file. So, right, if we look at Meta's hello.row here, for example, right? Does tab autocomplete not work on this?
No, it does, but it gives you the wrong directory, though.
Oh, sorry.
That's
But so the point is that if you, whatever code you're going to deploy to the blockchain needs to live in a source file. It doesn't need the .row extension. That's just sort of a helpful thing so that you know what type of file it is. But any old text file will do, right? So if we look at what Meta's doing here, right? She's got this hello world contract, and then she says new channel in, and she calls that hello world contract. So ultimately what this is going to do is write this string, so this could be your JSON string, to the my channel, which is going to be one of these unforgeable names that I'm sure you've heard about lots and lots of times while you're here.
Okay.
So you just have whatever data you want in a text file that is valid rolling source code, do a deploy, giving that source file as the argument to the deploy function, and then when the node proposes, it'll be in a block on the blockchain.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I realize this is super early in the life of RChain, but has there been, or are there going to be any projects to compile other languages into Rolang?
There's been a couple whispers, I guess we would say, from different community members that are interested in that kind of a project. It's tricky though, right? Because Rolang is fundamentally very different from a lot of other languages, and so, in principle, you could probably compile JavaScript down to Rolang if you worked real hard at it. Go would be like a natural one to try because it's also like a pretty concurrent language. But sequential languages like Python or even Scala, right? Like you compiling that down into Rolang would be doable, but would be extremely inefficient because writing sequential code in Rolang is hard. It's basically just comm event after comm event after comm event to sort of force the order of things, right? So. I think at the end of the day, there won't be any core dev team effort to write such a tool that compiles some existing language down to Rolang. Some community member might contribute it, but ultimately I think that even if there is such a tool, there will be very few cases in which it'll be prudent to use it.
Right, okay, cool.
Other questions? Anything you want to ask us about with the architecture, the platform, using the platform? Go ahead. Do you?
Yeah, Michael mentioned yesterday that there were lots of libraries missing from Rolang. How would I go on to start implementing a library?
Oh, that's a great question. I like this a lot. So, step one would be to learn Rolang to some reasonably high proficiency, right? What I was referring to the other day was something like in Scala, there's the standard collections library as an example, right? This is something that's written in Scala itself. It's not a language feature extension. It's just a standard thing that comes shipped with the language because it contains lots of useful functionalities. So step one would be to learn Rolang really well, and then step two would be to try to write some good idiomatic Rolang code that does the thing you're interested in doing, and then just make it available to the community after that. We don't have, as of today, a really good story for including external packages. Essentially, the way things work right now is you have to include whatever contracts you're going to be using in your tuple space at the beginning. And so essentially what that corresponds to today is in the Genesis block, we have a whole bunch of contracts that exist from the get-go. This includes the mint-based contracts for like token transfers. It also includes the linked list contract and either contract that I wrote just for like my own convenience. But we would totally welcome contributions from people who, when they see a need for something and write some good Rolang code for it, to send that off to us and see if it could be included in the Genesis block in a future test note refresh, or maybe even get one of the co-op members to deploy it to the chain because it's super useful.
And is there somewhere some kind of pointer to an example of how you implemented these contracts and how they can be reused?
There are such things. So
I haven't seen that in the tutorial.
You want to bring up GitHub?
Yep, I can bring up GitHub. I can do that.
Yeah, so Mena's bringing up GitHub for us. All the code that we write is open source and available, so it's always hanging around. So if you look at the Casper repository for RChain, Casper source, main, there's a nice Rolang subfolder there for you. So you go into Rolang, and these are all the contracts that actually go into the Genesis block. So if we take a look at, let's say, either.row as an example. So I've done some of my own convenience things, but this is not necessarily an example that everyone needs to follow. So I give it some kind of package similar to what Scala would do. And in fact, this is actually, we have internally a build extension for SBT that will compile Rolang code that it finds in our project. This is really handy because it means that we can actually access this from within Scala. And so it actually parses this out and will create the Scala object at that package name. I also try to give something equivalent to an import, even though, like I said, Rolang doesn't have a native package management thing. You just assume that it's available to you. So I just put in a comment here, this needs linked list, which is also in that same directory, right? If you don't have linked list, this contract's not going to work. And the reason it needs it is, if Meta scrolls down a little bit.
Yeah, I can scroll down. All I can do.
The reason it needs it is right here, right? So you can see I call linked list what we call the fold method on linked list. And this enables us to do this compose thing, right? So the idea is that I have some sequence of operations that could fail, and I want to sequence them all together compositionally, and so that corresponds to just folding over the list using their own internal flat map operation. So this is just a fold that sort of flat maps all your ethers into each other automatically.
And what would happen if I created a contract or a name that's called linked lists 2 and I deployed that to the blockchain?
Yeah, totally. That's also a great question. This is exactly what the point of the registry is, right? So today, this is a forgeable name, right? This is just something any old person could write down and throw any old continuation on. And so that would totally break this contract at least 50% of the time, or maybe they deploy a million versions of it, and then it would deploy, it would make this thing fail all but for 1 in 1 million times. So once we have the name registry in place, this will be replaced with a name registry lookup, right? So similar to how IO looks today, right? You've got that row : IO : standard out thing that's bringing in the standard out ability. We will have something similar. In the Genesis block, we'll register standard library things that are useful, and so instead of calling this, I'd have up here in my new thing, I would say new, say linked list instance, and then brackets, row : collection : linked list as an example. And then I'd be able to call the fold method on that.
And then it will be registered to my namespace.
And then it would be registered to the Genesis namespace.
Yeah, in this case,
but
but
if you write your own thing, then yeah, you can register it using the name registry, and you can call it yourself in your own future contracts. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely encourage people to take a look at any Rolang examples, both in the Rolang project and also what's being used in Casper.
So,
These are idioms that I've fallen into, but I would totally welcome people to look at them and see if they feel like they're sensible idioms, maybe suggest other ones. Like Rolang is still a very new language, and we're looking for style suggestions and ways to improve general readability and efficiency and this kind of thing. So it's good to have other people play with it too.
So right now, the right way to do some kind of import is to use a forgeable name and to just reuse it in the content.
Yeah. Today you assume that there is the right continuation that you want at some forgeable name. Yeah.
So question about enhancement requests and the process, but just to give an example, to set up the question. So in Ethereum, if you're running your local node, you can subscribe to events like when there's a transaction that affects an address, call me, right, as an application. And then in Fura, for example, their centralized RESTful interface doesn't do eventing, and through our RCON API doesn't have eventing either, but we have listen for, which is a bad name, listen for name at channel or whatever it's called. But that is a polling operation today, right, from a client perspective.
It's not push, yes, that's right.
Right, so let's say I wanted to put an enhancement request in for a publish subscribe for at address or at channel. What would be the proper process to put in that enhancement request?
Oh, yeah, you can file a ticket in Jira, create a story, assign it to me, I'll see it.
Thank you.
Okay. Michael and I did talk about this today. We feel that the listen at a name it could be a lot better. So I filed an enhancement ticket to improve that. Feels a little bit convoluted in terms of how we're doing it. I think there's a better way for us to provide data back to the user.
Yeah, so to be clear, it's a good API. We're not going to change the core API. We're just going to expose something higher level to the user because
good.
Listening on a single name is like a really low level, really hard thing to use effectively.
The name does kind of imply a subscribe as opposed to get, which would be more of a one-time thing.
Yeah, in terms of the name itself, the name of the API, yes. Any other questions? I think we're pretty close to time. The session was supposed to go to 3:45, right? I think.
Oh yeah, we're done. Look at that.
Yep. So you feel free to reach out to any one of us on Discord or here while we're at the conference for the duration of the day. And thanks for your attention.